Welcome to Understanding Oklahoma, a series of conversations looking at the richness but also the complexity of the cultures and histories that contribute to Oklahoma's distinctive identity. It is such a pleasure to have Warren Queton here today. I'm so pleased to talk to him. His Kiowa name is Pa'a. He'll probably pronounce it better for you. Warren served as OU's first tribal liaison before returning to be the director of higher education for the Kiowa tribe. He continues to share his talents as an instructor in OU's Department of Native American Studies. Warren, thank you so much for being here for this segment. Could you talk a little bit about your perspective as a Kiowa person? Ironically, we're talking about understanding Oklahoma, but I think your perspective is larger and predates the territory, the state, so on. Could you talk about that, please?
Thank you. Aho Deonde RC for having me today. All I call Icon is my Kiowa name is The Moon is Coming. So very grateful to be here and talk a little bit about our history that does predate the state of Oklahoma, its emergence in 1907. Our Koigu people, we were once headquartered out of the Yellowstone Mountain region of Wyoming and Montana. And we actually migrated to Oklahoma starting around 1775 when we acquired horses from the Crow Nation of Montana. That was an incredible change to our life when we acquired the horse. And we actually moved southeast to the Black Hills. And during 1775, there was a large, domino effect because of European contact on the eastern seaboard. Tribes were moving west, and as a result, the Sioux Nation was moving southwest. And we actually encountered the Sioux Nation around the Black Hills. And because of their numbers and the limited number of Koigu or Kiowa people at the time, we actually decided to migrate south in order to survive.
Migrate south.
We migrated south all the way to the northern panhandle of Texas, Oklahoma, southwest Oklahoma, Kansas, and then eastern Colorado.
It seems like the amount of time that the Kiowa Nation has been in this place we call Oklahoma created an opportunity for traditions to take hold and to be strong and handed down over generations. Could you talk about some of those Kiowa traditions that we should know about?
Sure. So our Kiowa people have always had the Sundance religion, and that was what they brought with them from the north. We were set up in a band system that was all based upon war bands, war chiefs. And we have traditions that are based upon that structure. We call it Yapahega or warrior lifestyle. You have to understand that our Kiowa people were not one organization, one tribe as a unit, right? A lot of European colonists would like to say tribes govern themselves under one supreme leader, and our tribe was not set up like that. We were very much set up in bands under war chiefs, and those war chiefs directed warriors to commit deeds based upon the type of society they were in line with.
So the Kiowa warrior is its own tradition.
Correct.
Probably a very rich tradition.
Correct. It's a very rich tradition. We had 7 societies that existed. Some would say there were 10 societies, but 7 functional societies of a warrior society. And so you started off as a young person. You would start off as a rabbit. It's called polai in our language. That was a beginning of where you began your almost like a basic training for a warrior. You learn how to take care of your horse. You learn how to shoot a bow and arrow, track game.
Would a Kiowa young person today be aware of some aspects of that Kiowa warrior tradition? Is
Yes.
that part of acculturation?
It's still alive, RC. It's still alive today. We still have our rabbit dance that is performed every summer at the Kiowa Gourd Clan ceremony in Carnegie, Oklahoma, at the headquarters of the Kiowa Nation. And it is performed in the morning. And it used to be the Rabbit Society, or Polai, used to be just boys. Now we've incorporated females into the society. And it is still very much alive. And there's a rich oral tradition that comes with learning who we are as Kiowa people. And that begins in the society with stories as a young person of war deeds, or even stories of discussing morals,
Mm.
discussing what is the values and beliefs of our Kiowa people. They exist through story and song. And so the young people begin with that. They learn how to dance there, and they have their own songs and their own culture, so to speak.
So it sounds like there's possibly greater cultural continuity for the Kiowa than maybe some other indigenous nations just because of time and place.
Sure,
Yeah,
absolutely. Because you think about it, we came to Oklahoma, only 200 years ago, right?
yeah, right.
And we brought that tradition with us, and it's still alive to this day. Even though we have been settled here in Oklahoma on a reservation, we still have our traditional customs and
Mm.
beliefs intact, and we've adapted them to our traditional warrior societies were adapted to our tribe today, and functional in terms of military service.
Mhm.
So we still have. I'm a member of the Kiowa Black Leggings, and that is a little bit more, I guess we call it an elite warrior society. We have societies that are still functional
They're
today.
at OU commencement, the Black Legging Society, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, they bring the colors in at graduation commencement. Um, our societies are still functional, even to include the Rabbit Society. We have the Gord clan, the Thaimpega. They were one of our war societies. Our Kiowa Black Leggings, and we still have our Ohoma. Our Ohoma was also a war society. We call it Ohoma is a corruption of the word Omaha.
Mm.
We got a dance from them, and it still exists today. But every one of the societies had a specialized type of warfare, and families were a part of that society, and they still are to this day. So certain families camp, and we have a ceremony that's performed, just like you would in military service today. You have airborne, you have infantry,
Hmm.
you have special forces. The tribe had that prior to European contact. We already had specialized types of warfare, and for example, the Black Leggings, they were specialized in warfare.
Since you bring up European contact, let me ask you to go really broad for a moment. I
Uh-huh.
know this is just a huge topic, but the whole issue of the conquest in this hemisphere
Mhm.
that takes in what happened in South America and Canada and the continental U.S., et cetera,
Mhm.
it was just a huge development, like a trauma that happened in a hemisphere.
Absolutely.
Could you talk about that a little bit, the impact of colonial arrival in the New World?
Sure. So a lot of the contact we had as a nation, the Kiowas had very late. Think about it. 1800, we were just now learning and really coming into contact with uh, the colonists,
Mhm.
and we were still very much a warlike, band-like tribe on the plains. Like many of our plains nations were just now coming into contact around 1800. So again, you think about that's only 200 years of contact with each other, and within
Mhm.
100 years, we saw the degradation of our buffalo herds.
Mhm.
That's who we followed from the Yellowstone Mountains and the Black Hills. We followed buffalo herds because we had horses to adapt and follow them for longer distances across the plains. So we were following these herds all the way to Oklahoma. Now we come in contact with settlers, people who were traveling across Oklahoma on the Santa Fe Trail. Settlers, weren't here to settle Oklahoma, but were passing through. A lot of that contact we avoided a lot for a long time. And then when we started to encroach on settlements, uh, that's when things started to become interesting for our tribe. We became raiders, and we aligned with the Comanche, Apache to make raids for survival because our buffalo herds were being massacred. The number of buffalo on the plains, was, I think the last herd I heard of was about 4 million, and it was decimated by white settlers because they knew that was our center of our world, was the survival of the buffalo.
Warren, you must feel, it must just seem insane to you at sometimes that some moments, the history that you're talking about, and it's not processed, it's not really understood in mainstream culture
Mhm.
much at all. People don't have a lot of awareness. You and I were talking earlier about the fact that some people think there were 30 million indigenous people
Exactly.
in the New World, and after 60 years of contact with the Spanish, fewer than a million. I mean, that's a Holocaust 5 times the size of what happened in World War II. It's so huge and so devastating. You'd think we would talk about it all the time.
Yeah, I think the major trauma that affected our tribe was probably not so much the warfare, but the epidemics that raged across our
Smallpox
tribe.
and so on.
Smallpox, cholera, the common flu, influenza, all of these diseases that we had never had contact with decimated us.
If you don't have protection, a cold could kill
Correct.
you. Yeah.
Yes. And so our bodies were not prepared for any type of that contact, that disease. And so it decimated us. Our tribe has always been small in number, but to have it divided in half because of disease, I believe through our oral tradition, we were only a maximum number of about 3,000 people. That was the maximum number. And then to have that cut down to 1,500. And then that's a low number of a race, of a people, right? Of a tribe.
You're talking about an epic, horrendous event. What would you like mainstream culture to understand about your perspective, about what's been lost, about the trauma and the sort of post-traumatic stress disorder we're all dealing with, I think? What would you like mainstream culture to understand?
Understand that our tribal government was never one tribal government to be dealt with. I think that's what European colonists wanted to do. They wanted to find one leader to speak for the tribe. And I think we talk about tribal representation. Our tribe was not set up in one government. We were band-like. We had different leaders. You might have a leader of war councils or a council of war councils. Correction, let me say that over. You might have a council of war chiefs come together to make decisions for the best interest of the people, right? But what European colonists wanted to do was make a treaty and conquer the tribe by using one chief. We want to talk to one person. We don't want to go talk to these other bands. We need one person who can speak for the well-being of the nation. And we were not set up like that.
Which was just never the reality.
That was never the reality because we had to survive in small groups. It was better to travel and survive in small groups because of our bands and our system. Following buffalo, you can't, 3,000 people, it was hard to move them all at once. And I think our takeaway is you can't treat tribes all the same because like Southeastern tribes who might have had larger governments and intact and one leader to follow, we were not set up that way. And we're still struggling with that because we've been, in 1934, under the Indian Reorganization Act, John Collier wrote the plan and wanted our Native Americans to self-govern themselves. But they didn't. They gave us a cookie-cutter constitution to formulate a government. It was almost like a template that has blanks in it, and it's a constitution. It says Constitution up top, and it might say put your tribal name right below there.
Minimal engagement.
Minimal engagement.
Yeah.
Nothing about what is traditional about your tribal government, your way of governing your people. And it's not one entity governing our Kiowa people. It was set up in bands. It was set up in family groups, dependent upon their survival, what they needed. And different bands had different needs, different customs, different ways of knowing who they are. And you might even say that some of the bands that we were set up were different altogether as far as like the way in which they did war, the way in which they spoke, their language was different, their identity was different. So go ahead.
It just seems like it's a huge commitment in mainstream culture to try to reduce Native people to a few stereotypes that are out there in popular culture as a defense against dealing with the reality of Indigenous people alive now, with communities now, with needs now, participation, need to get closer to its government now. Is that what you think? I mean,
I think I think things are changing.
Okay.
People are speaking up, being advocates. We now have the first, as of yesterday, the first Native American to be appointed Secretary of
Deb Holland.
the
Oh,
Interior.
yeah, that's wonderful.
So I think, especially now, tribal people see a change coming. They have often, we are forgotten about when it comes to the federal government. Hopefully, we will see some changes. I think we've already seen like changes when it comes to mascots and imaging.
Yeah.
As far as like American Indians, we have major football teams, baseball teams, sports, mascots that are being changed now because we've been advocating that we are not a mascot. We are people. We have a distinct identity that needs to be respected, and we're not there to for your sports team to make fun of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as far as imaging goes, that's changing, and it already has. We're talking about what the future holds for our tribes, their sovereignty, ways of maintaining that, ways of affirming their sovereignty have now come to the top. And now tribes have one thing: they have an economic base which they can use their capital to promote their sovereignty. And we're seeing that today.
And this is not a point that you've been making, I understand, but also it cannot be good for the mainstream. It cannot be good for white people to dehumanize other folks. I mean, they're dehumanizing themselves. Nobody wins with this bad system that doesn't recognize the humanity of whole nations, people.
I think it goes back to this idea of a romanticized Indian, that people they are
Right.
heroic, they are humble people, the iconic, Indian person on horseback. They aspire to see that because that's who they know. That's what they know from media, right? From Western movies that they were raised on. That's what an Indian is, an heroic, romanticized notion.
We're talking about such really big issues, and this really needs to be a whole day discussion
Yes,
or whatever. But could you give us 2 or 3 ideas that would be takeaways that would be particularly valuable for people who might watch this segment?
So the major takeaway is we are still here. We have an identity. We have a language that still exists. A lot of those languages are leaving us because of the post-traumatic stress on our tribes, our tribal nations. They were taught not to speak their native language. Now tribes are asserting their sovereignty, creating programs to reverse that and revitalize their languages. I think people need to recognize that we still have an identity that's alive today, and we are going to continue to assert our sovereignty through our language, through our maintenance of our identity.
So if people could keep that in mind, that could take them a long ways.
Yes, and we also need to respect the land on which we inhabit. We do that. I mean, tribes, we are always finding ways to maintain our land base, but it's a balance of also how do we maintain our economic development, our cultural beliefs, and maintain our land base, because we don't want to exploit our land resources. We want to be in balance with things that we believe in, right? It's not about oil and gas, it's about, or logging timber, it's about finding ways in which we can use our land base, maintain it, purchase more land to maintain our sovereignty.
Those are important takeaways.
Correct.
Warren, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for being with us. Please join us for other segments of Understanding Oklahoma. Take care.